This is the Comedy Room. We're talking about comedy and the people behind it. Now, this very special episode, we are going to be reviewing the year that has passed. So we're looking at the comedy of 2021, and that should take about 30 seconds if we really go into depth. And we'll also be looking at the work of a comedy legend of the highest order, Rowan Atkinson. So, the comedy of 2021. There wasn't a huge amount, was there?
No, hello all. No, there wasn't. It's quite a poor year of brand new comedy. Anyway, I mean, there's plenty of old comedy, sort of couple of second series, third series of this, that, and the other, but nothing majorly new that stands out, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I think the best thing we got all year was The Cleaner, which was the Greg Davis penned sitcom about the crime scene cleaner, which was based on a German show.
Yes, which we I think we sort of went in a little bit in depth on that on the Greg Davis special of the podcast. So we've you wanted to know more about The Cleaner, look for our Greg Davis episode. But as Andy says, that is possibly the highlight. I'm just going to mention one that I've not seen yet. I'll say yet. There'll never be any chance in the whole world that I'll ever watch it. Some of our listeners may have actually watched it, and if they have, feedback via our Twitter would be great. But it's a show called The Holden Girls, Mandy and Myrtle. It was an E4 program, came out sometime in 2021, and it features Amanda Holden and her grandmother, Myrtle. But her grandmother is played by Lee Francis, who many people will know as Keith Lemon. Now, I don't even want to go any deeper into this because just the thought of Amanda Holden and Lee Francis playing an elderly woman, I'd rather have my eyes poked out, sir.
I usually watch anything that Lee Francis does. I think he's really, really funny most of the time. But it does have a bit of a vibe of, we've seen some kind of Eddie Murphy films. We think this is going to be hilarious. And it just sounds like something that UK TV Play would have rejected in the early 2000s, possibly involving Matt Lucas dressing up again.
Yeah, now the premise of it looks like there's been a couple of people, had a few beers, sat around a table and thought, should we make a show that's going to be even worse than Mrs. Brown's Boys?
Yeah. Mrs. Brown's Boys has gone on a bit long, hasn't it?
Yeah. I think after the first 3 minutes, I think it's gone on longer than it should have done. But
the early seasons were funny. Were funny.
Yeah, but then you're right. I think the joke was probably worn on too much, and now I need to get this. I didn't even know why I brought it up. I need to get it out of my head because it's something that is. Yeah, do you know what? That's I might even actually watch an episode of it just to report back.
I think you should watch the whole series.
Don't push things too far. I think when I said an episode, I think we should do a sweepstake of how many minutes I can actually last.
I'm taking everything up to 3.
Yeah, and hopefully the first 2 minutes is just the intro.
Yeah, the advert's gone a bit longer than expected.
Yeah. We
did have some good shows. So I said we had The Cleaner. We also had The Outlaws, which was the Stephen Merchant comedy that was. It was all about the actual. It was the community payback show.
Yeah.
So it had kind of like crime thriller sort of elements to it as well. So that was good. So that was a new show we got this year.
So the Outlaws, was that like Misfits without the superpowers?
It was weird because it was sort of you couldn't really tell whether it was sort of like a crime, sort of like a crime drama that had jokes in it,
Yeah.
or whether it was a comedy show that had sort of like crime elements in it. But it was different, but it wasn't your typical kind of sit down and half an hour of canned laughter sort of thing. It was something that was a bit different, but it was different in a good way.
I do see they've greenlit it for a second series, so
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. Definitely, definitely want to keep an eye out for. But to be honest, the highlight of the sitcom year for me was a new series of Dead Pixels.
yes, you've mentioned that before. That's one of your favourites.
It's just so funny, and in the new series, they really kind of move things forward by bringing in new characters and kind of putting them into situations sort of outside of just like their own sort of relationships and like work and things like that. So they actually brought in like characters and gave them sort of romantic interests and stuff.
Ritchie's in that, isn't she?
It's who? Sorry,
Charlotte Ritchie.
Charlotte Ritchie is in that. She plays Alison, who is the only one that's not involved in the game.
Yeah, I like her. I liked her when she was in that. She was with Jack Whitehall. Was it? They were students. Dead Meat. Was it Dead Meat?
I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, anything with Charlotte Ritchie in is always good. There was a new series of Sandyland, which was really, really funny. That is the one with Sanjeev Bhaskar as a guy that fakes his own death as an insurance scam.
Was that the one that in the first series was Bobby Ball, or am I thinking something different?
Yeah, you're thinking of the Cockfields, where Bobby Ball plays Joe Wilkinson's father. But in the second series, they bring in Gregor Fisher as his stepfather.
Okay. Yeah. Our listeners have probably realised for a bloke who's on a comedy sitcom podcast, I don't tend to watch a lot of sitcoms nowadays. So I'm letting the side down a little bit, but they're all lined up on my planner, ready to go. I just need to find some time to sit and watch them.
But yeah, there's been a few little bits and pieces this year, not masses of wonderful stuff, but one or two little bits.
Yeah, stuff I do watch that have got to come back for series 3, series 4, things like Brassic, and weirdly because I don't fit the demographic at all, but the Netflix show Sex Education.
Never seen
that because the wife watched it, so I tagged along, as they say. It's got Gillian Anderson in it. Anything with her is always worth a watch, and it's probably aimed at the teenage to early 20s demographic. So I'm well away from that, but I did quite enjoy it. But Brassic to me is one of the best shows of this century, of that genre, because it's like Shameless, but with more of a comedy element to it.
Okay, I'll keep an eye out for that one.
Joe Gilgun, I mentioned Misfits earlier. He was in that. Joe Gilgun was in it. He's from This Is England. I think he just plays Joe Gilgun. I don't think his acting is method. It's or he doesn't have to change what he does, because all he's doing is playing something similar to himself. But he does it very well. I'm not slating him for it. He's fantastic at what he does. So that's well worth a catch up if anybody hasn't watched Brassic yet.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for that one, because so I've watched bits of Brassic, but never really kind of got into it massively. But yeah, I think definitely one to keep an eye out for.
Yeah. There's one more I've got. Sorry to jump. One more I've got. Then that's probably it for my comedy for this year. Is Code 404 with Stephen Graham and Danny Mays. Stephen Graham, he's my favourite actor of all time. I'd actually watch him cross the road. He's that good, you know. So when the comedy came out, put it on, and it was a struggle to get into, but series 2 was a lot better. Where the premise is the Daniel Mays character. They're both coppers. Daniel Mays' policeman died in the line of duty. They brought him back to life as a sort of android robot. And so automatically the premise there is like, oh my God, that's rubbish. And to be fair, the longer it's going on, the better it's getting. So I think series 3 could be its one where everyone says, yes, this is a great comedy. But at the moment, it's still finding its feet. But it's one or two funny moments.
Yeah, that sounds like it's one to keep an eye out for anyway. Because
again, it's Phil. If you stumble upon it and you've got 3 hours to fill, put it on. You know, it's not going to win any awards, but Stephen Graham and Danny Mays get awards for other stuff, so I don't think they care too much.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for that one because there's not a huge amount where we can kind of look back and say, this is a really sort of brilliant show as such. It's just hasn't really been anything. A few series have had sort of an additional kind of series, but one of the highlights for me was something called the Goes Wrong Show. And it's all sort of spin-offs of the Goes Wrong theatre shows.
Right.
They've done a couple of series on BBC One. So you have they'll have some sort of theatrical production, and there's all sorts of disasters that happen. It's all very sort of it's very sort of slapstick kind of comedy, but it's really, really funny. And they have sort of like recurring characters within like the theatre company doing different productions, and there's all sorts of bits and pieces of how these things inevitably don't go to plan. But if slapstick comedy is your sort of thing, then definitely one to watch.
Yeah, well, I do like comedy where people fall over and things like that. It's just, if someone falls over, it's funny. No matter who they are, where it is, what situation it is, and you sometimes feel guilty. You think, oh, maybe I should have made sure they were all right before I laughed. But sometimes you can't help it, can you?
Yeah, but that was 2021 in review. Now we turn to our random year generator, which for its own good is sat in Felixstowe at the moment, because after that particular selection, I was very much threatening violence towards it. So if you want to give it a quick kick, and we can see what year we're reviewing next month.
Okay. So we've stopped on 1998.
1998. Okay, that'll be an interesting one to have a look at. So tune in next episode for our look at 1998. But next up, we have one of the kind of, I'd say, founding fathers of alternative comedy. Someone who, if you will have seen a lot of his comedy, no matter where you are or what you've watched. So, Rowan Atkinson, he started off on Not the 9 O'Clock News in 1979. The first series of which wasn't the greatest, was it?
Dude, it's been so many years since I've watched it, and it's one of those that isn't. It's hard to find nowadays, isn't it? There's clips on YouTube, etc., but there's probably only about 3 or 4 clips that actually stick in my head. The main one is it's the darts, where they're taking the mickey out of obese dart players and talk about going for trebles, and then he puts 3 vodkas inside him and doubles and things like that. And another one, which is it's probably not even funny, but it sticks in my head where they were in a factory, a car making factory, and everyone's called Bob. All right, Bob. Hello, Bob. Hello, Bob. And then the caption underneath it says, British, whatever, made in a factory by Roberts. And and I think that sticks in my head. That must be nearly 40 years since I saw that clip. But it's weird how that's in my head.
Yeah, I mean, there's things like Gerald the Gorilla is one of my favorite sketches.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite sketches just of any comedy ever. And it's the whole thing of everything kind of gets turned. So it's like being interviewed. It's like, I'm guessing that you spend your money on bananas and carpet cleaners. And he's like, well, I do spend about 95% of my income on those items, but I do afford myself the occasional luxury. I'm very fond of the music of Johnny Mathis, and it's still literally Rowan Atkinson in a gorilla suit talking about his love of Johnny Mathis. It's just so funny. And the hi-fi shop as well. Did you say what about my old 78? It's just there's things like that that really kind of stand out for me. But the show was more about its sort of impact of showing what alternative comedy was and sort of moving away from the kind of racist and sexist comedy that we had in a lot of the 70s. Frequent listeners will know that we don't talk massively about comedy of the 70s because there was so much that wasn't things you could watch now with a clear conscience, for want of a better phrase. There's a lot of it where you'd watch it and you'd be like, no, I can't sit through this. It's just not right. Especially if you sort of if you weren't around for it first time and you're not sort of well averse to the things that are said. But after Not the 9 o'clock news, the next time we saw Rowan Atkinson was in Blackadder. And Blackadder for me was one of the first sort of comedies that I really sort of gelled with, but not through it being on TV. Because obviously it finished in 89, and by that time I was only about 8.
Yeah, well, for me, the series 1 and series 2, I was still at high school. Series 3 was a year after I'd left school. And then obviously the last one, I was in my last year of being a teenager. So it was one that stuck in my head as sort of, I was at that age where, especially at school, because if somebody watched it and was talking, you then had to watch it. Otherwise, you're not going to be part of the main group. Because if the main group was talking about Blackadder and you didn't watch it, you felt you had to watch it so you know what other people were talking about. And that was one of the first programs that sort of thing happened.
Yeah.
But it was more from Blackadder 2 because not many people watched Blackadder 1, I don't think, first time around.
I had a tape that you got through, and you had to send away tokens from tea bags, and I had that one, which was the Bells episode, and I had one which was Peter Cook and Dudley Moore. So it had things like the Frog and Peach and E.L. Whisty and stuff like that on it. Yeah. And it was sort of like early 90s, I think it was. So it was just kind of like I was the age where I was sort of discovering comedy. And the Bells episode is hilarious. It's one of my absolute favorites anyway. Because you have things like it's the whole thing of he goes off to see the wise woman and stuff like that. And it's just watching it kind of later, because I watched Blackadder in retrospect. It was so funny. Because I remember Tony Robinson as Fat Tulip from Fat Tulip's Garden. A very sort of niche kids' TV show of the 80s that not many people seem to remember. But I also remember him in Maid Marian and A Merry Men,
Yeah.
which was basically Blackadder for kids, which I absolutely adored. Because I was the right sort of age for it and everything. But watching Blackadder kind of in retrospect, I kind of got to see what all the fuss was about, but sort of at my own pace.
Yeah.
And after a few films in the 80s, we saw something on New Year's Day 1990 that really sort of shook up comedy, and especially sort of anything that really sort of shook things up for anyone that likes sort of like the Peter Sellers and sort of Inspector Clouseau type films, and Mr. Bean. And we saw a style of comedy where there was very, very little said. And it was just so different to anything else that anyone had really sort of seen. Obviously, it's very similar to Monsieur Hulot, the French character.
Mm.
But it was just so funny.
I mean, again, that was Richard Curtis, wasn't it? And
yeah,
one of your favourites you've mentioned in the past before, Robin Driscoll. He was heavily involved, wasn't he?
Yeah, he co-wrote a lot of it. In fact, most of the sort of later episodes are him, because it was him and Rowan Atkinson together. Because Richard Curtis was involved at the start, Ben Elton was involved in the first episode, but sort of the later stuff is just Rowan Atkinson and Robin Driscoll together, and Richard Curtis involved in the first sort of half dozen or so.
Yeah.
But it was really, really sort of completely different to anything else, and there's a lot of really kind of subtle comedy in it as well. So even like the intro, the theme tune is sung in Latin, but the choir actually sings "Behold the man who is a bean." And even like the end of part one and part two, they actually sing end of part one in Latin and part two in Latin. So it's just kind of like, okay, here's this choir singing something in Latin that I don't know, and it's actually, when the end of the part is, they're actually singing end of part one, for example. But
got a little link to Felix though with Mr. Bean.
Oh, okay.
Very, very tenuous, as you could probably imagine. We have the gentleman that lives here, who's the spitting image of Mr. Bean, and he actually dresses up as him, and he's got over 1 million subscribers on his Instagram, where 99% of them are Chinese. He actually goes to China and does Mr. Bean conventions, and they love him. It's crazy, and he'll pop up on Facebook every now and then with a little Christmas or New Year message from Mr. Bean, and you'd think it was Rowan Atkinson. It's quite frightening.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. But Mr. Bean was actually a massive export. So it was produced originally by Thames and then later by Central. But he's actually been exported to, I think, 180 countries.
Oh. And but the scary thing about that is, though, if that's other countries only look at Britain, they think we're all like Mr. Bean.
Wouldn't be that far from the truth.
Yeah, you're probably right, actually, to be fair. Yeah.
But there's so many kind of really big kind of comedy names that pop up in kind of cameo roles. So, for example, um, when he's on the train and there's somebody reading a book and laughing at it, that's Stephen Frost. Many people will know from the early episodes of Whose Line Is It Anyway?
He was also big in the Carla Black Label adverts, wasn't he?
Yes, I think he
With
was.
Vaseline from London's Burning.
And I believe David Schneider was in one of them as well. Richard Wilson is the dentist that he goes to, or he does his own teeth.
Yeah.
And when he has his camera stolen, it's actually Nick Hancock that steals the camera. Because there's a great scene in the police station with the identity parade, where they're all put in the kind of metal wire bins, and they get prodded by him with a pencil. Prods them all in the stomach with a pencil to hear them all say "ow" and to get the voice. And anybody who knows who Nick Hancock is will know he's got a very, very distinctive Stoke accent. So he's going along this identity parade and he's prodding them all with the pencil. And you've got all these different accents. And of course, you've got Nick Hancock's very distinctive accent. And he's been prodded a few times with the pencil. It's just such a great show.
But he had a girlfriend, didn't he, Mr. Bean?
Is what, sorry?
He had a girlfriend.
Yes.
It just popped into my head. The only other thing I've seen her in was EastEnders, and she was Kathy Beale's illegitimate daughter that died from heroin. And then she appeared in Mr. Bean. Yeah.
Yeah, because a lady called Matilda Ziegler played her. There's actually a documentary about Mr. Bean that was on fairly recently, and she's completely different to the character in every single way you can possibly imagine. She's a brilliant actress, but she's been in bits and pieces of stuff. I think she's been in Call the Midwife, and a couple of other bits and pieces as well. I think she's a lot of theatre.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So she's mainly known for sort of theatre stuff. And there was actually a theatrical version of Mr. Bean, and she was in that.
Lovely.
But there's like a huge sort of export market for Mr. Bean, and I think he's the most liked fictional character on Facebook. And I think the only people that are more popular than him are among people like Cristiano Ronaldo.
Okay.
It says a lot when you have to be one of the greatest footballers of all time to be more popular than Mr. Bean.
Yeah.
But that was a huge, huge part of his work in the 90s, alongside the films, the Mr. Bean films as well. So the films actually saw us seeing him in a different sort of setting. So other people sort of reacting to him rather than just the things that he did. And they were sort of, especially the second film, was very much sort of a similar sort of thing to the sort of characters that influenced the creation of Mr. Bean himself. But the next show that Rowan Atkinson did was 1995, and it was The Thin Blue Line. That was the Ben Elton penned sitcom that was in the police station.
Yeah.
We had him alongside James Dreyfus, who played Constable Goody, who was He was quite an interesting character, kind of oblivious to the world around him.
But some could say that's a great casting for a policeman, but I don't know who'd say that sort of thing.
It's there's a real sort of kind of backward and forward between him and Detective Inspector Grimm,
David Haig,
who's the head of CID.
Haig? The CID man, that was Haig, wasn't it?
David Haig, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a real sort of us and them sort of mentality, which is a really sort of fun dynamic to have. But that was a Ben Elton sitcom, which, when you sort of watch it in retrospect, you really can tell that nobody else could have written it apart from Ben Elton. You know, the kind of really sort of kind of satirical sort of almost sort of kind of current affair, you know, kind of satire of current affairs that only Ben Elton could ever have done.
Yeah, I get that.
It's really sort of astutely written and really sort of you can see that he's got very much an awareness of what's going on and how to make it funny.
Yeah.
But I think some of the humor is sort of its time a little bit. But when we're looking back at something 25 years ago, it's inevitable it's going to be like that. But the rest of Rowan Atkinson's career sort of since that time has been films. So obviously he was in 4 Weddings and a Funeral, Rat Race, and the Johnny English films, which are surprisingly good parodies of sort of like James Bond and similar sort of ilk of film. And then there's the film that is one massive red flag, or one massive bunch of red flags. This is where I think we're going to lose a lot of our listeners. Love Actually.
Yeah, one of those films that if you admit you don't like it, people think people think there's something wrong here. Yeah, I've only ever seen it once, and it was, we watched it a couple of years ago, and then 2 days later, I had the family round, and we ended up having a drunken conversation whether or not Andrew Lincoln in that film was a sexual predator.
The thing is, it's every single person in there is some sort of red flag. So you've got Colin Firth, and his character goes all the way to Portugal to go after his housekeeper.
Yeah.
Who doesn't speak any English. Then you've got Alan Rickman's character, who has the whole thing with his secretary and his wife. You've got Hugh Grant as the Prime Minister, who ends up with some sort of assistant. And it's just, there's so many red flags in there. And of course, you've got the cliche of the English guy going to America, and of course, American women fall over themselves for him, and it's just, ugh, just generally just ugh. It could have been a really, really, really well written parody of romantic comedy films that could have had sort of universal appeal among fans of the genre and people who cannot stand romantic comedies. But no, we got the film we got. And yes, it made a lot of money, but it's bloody awful.
Yeah, as I say, I reckon 90% of the listeners will disagree with us on this one.
I can just imagine that Twitter is going to blow up as soon as we release the episode.
Yeah.
But I stand by what I say. It has an amazing cast and just so many red flags. You wouldn't be able to say, well, this could happen. The majority of romantic comedies, there's some degree of realism to them. It's sort of embellished realism, but it's realism all the same. Whereas this is just, no, it wouldn't happen at all. But that is my controversial view. There's not a lot in films that I hate, apart from the teaching assistant guy in the nativity films. that is just, that's my personal bugbear. But Love Actually, that is a Christmas film that needs to get in the bin.
Just moving on slightly away from films, but still on Rowan Atkinson. One of his longest roles is probably a role that when we name him, people are like, oh, I don't know. But then you'll tell them what it was for. He played somebody called Richard Latham for 6 years.
Okay.
And it was the Barclaycard advert.
Oh, yes.
So that is a great quiz question. When you ask people about, Rowan Atkinson played Richard Latham in what? And 99% of the people don't know. But then you tell them, oh yeah. Because that went on for years, but then 6 years, Barclaycard adverts, didn't they? He was
yeah. They were actually really, really well done, those adverts, because even now, sort of decades later, we still remember them and we still remember what they were advertising. And there's not a lot of adverts that can do that. There's only sort of a handful of anything that we remember. If you watch sort of like old adverts from kind of like the 80s and 90s and stuff, there'll be so many where you think, oh, don't remember that, don't remember that, don't remember that. And then Barclaycard was there. Of course, it's Rowan Atkinson getting into some sort of scrape, and his assistant is always sort of much better than he is.
Yeah. And there's while we're on the old quiz questions, there's like he appeared in Mr. Bean in a couple of random TV shows. One was a Chinese, which I'm not even going to contemplate saying what it is. And another, he was in Bondi Rescue.
Oh, okay.
Which is Australian reality type thing, where the Coast Guards go and rescue people who get stranded in the sea in Bondi, and he appeared as Mr. Bean in one episode. But the quiz question is, Mr. Bean has appeared in the music video for 4 songs, and one of them is The Stonk by Hal and Pace.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that one?
Yep.
It was one of the very early comic relief songs.
Yeah. He also did he did a parody with was it Alice Cooper?
No, it was the Iron Maiden man, wasn't it?
I'd made them, but I think it was
Bruce Dickinson.
Yes, that's the one. I remember the song.
I think it was a cover or a redo of Ramones song, and it was I want to be elected. It was to do with some election campaign, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I vaguely remember that one. Well, I'm sure there was others. There was
Boyzone. He was in the
yes,
Boyzone picture review video as Mr. Bean,
yes,
and the fourth one as Mr. Bean was Matt Willis from Busted in 2007 with Crash.
yeah. My
And
knowledge of the music of Busted isn't great. I'll be
no,
honest.
and then he was in another video. So he's been in 5 music videos, but only 4 as Mr. Bean. And this one, he played a bartender, and that was with Ollie Murs and Snoop Doggy Dogg. Yeah,
I'm more surprised that they didn't release "I Like Trucking" from Not 9 O'Clock News, but I think the Ollie Murs one something to do with one of the Johnny English films.
it might have been.
Yeah, because yeah, he's more sort of more modern than the others, isn't he?
Yeah, so yeah, it probably was from the Ollie Murs' recent. So that'd probably be the 3rd Johnny English film that's probably on the soundtrack there. Yeah, makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, because like I said, I know that Ollie Murs is more sort of more modern than Busted and the like.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, he's certainly made a few quid out off the back of Mr. Bean. Best of luck to him.
yeah.
Because back to adverts, he's done several adverts as Mr. Bean as well. But I could, without getting opening Google, I wouldn't be able to tell you who for. But I know he's been on the TV with, I think Snickers or Twix or something sticks in my head for one of them. But the others I couldn't tell you. But I know he's been on several adverts as Mr. Bean.
Yeah, I think most of them are not sort of over here. I think one was possibly in Norway. But yeah, the majority of them weren't sort of UK specific.
Yeah. No, he's certainly varied, isn't he? With music videos, adverts, and TV and film and stage work. I mean, yeah,
Yeah, he's certainly been busy over the last
and
sort of 40 years or so.
say, I wonder if they can get him out of TV retirement and put him in something on the TV, because it's been a while. As you say, his last full series on TV was The Thin Blue Line, wasn't it? In or first comedy, because I'm sure he played Maigret for a while, didn't he? You know, in a reboot of Maigret, but that's not comedy. But apart from that, he's not really done much TV, is he? He was the Doctor in a comic relief episode of Doctor Who, wasn't he? Yeah, but that's about it, really.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see sort of what sort of comes next.
Oh, I do know next. I only found this out the other day, actually. He's currently filming, TVDB said, currently filming Wonka, which is the prequel to Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Oh, sort of Willy Wonka's sort of story.
Yeah, sort of Willy Wonka as a younger man. Yeah. I don't know. I've not done any sort of research on the film, so I don't know Rowan Atkinson's plan, or if it's a big role or just a cameo. I don't know, but all I know is he's in it, and so is Olivia Colman, but she's in everything. So
yeah, I think the young Wonka is going to be played by Timothée Chalamet, somebody else who's in everything at the moment.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. That's a name I don't recognise.
He's been in.
Got to be young, because I only know old people because I'm old. Is he British or is he American?
I believe he is American.
Cool.
But yeah, he's been in a lot of things. But it's sort of like an early sort of story as to what happened to Willy Wonka before the factory.
Oh,
But
yeah.
it's not something that's that was ever kind of penned by Roald Dahl himself. It was always because the Roald Dahl story focuses on the factory sort of existing and being this big thing that's always sort of been there. So and obviously they can't get Roald Dahl involved.
I know we're on a slight tangent here, but it'd be nice to see how other people deal with characters created by somebody else, and especially something of the magnitude of Roald Dahl. I mean, as a writer, it's got to be quite scary. You know, here's a job for you: do something with one of Roald Dahl's characters. You're like, really?
Yeah. The thing is, it's something where so many people sort of grew up with his sort of stuff.
Yeah, and anything like that now, it will be picked to pieces by thousands of people on the internet. So it's a scary old world. It's
yeah.
I mean, we're quite lucky. No one's actually abused us yet, and we're on episode 5 or 6 now, aren't we? So I think we've done quite well. We've actually had no online abuse. So I'll take that. But you might have started it now with Love Actually. You might get all the Love Actually fans after you.
Let's not mention that I don't like Love Actually on the internet. We don't want to poke that particular online bear.
Yeah, I know what I'll be doing next Christmas when everyone's posting about Love Actually. I'll be posting a link to this podcast and say, yeah, we talk about Love Actually on this podcast. Oh, and you see smoke come out their ears and everything. It'd be brilliant. I did see talking about the internet and people making jokes and things. I did actually laugh the other day when I saw it said if you watch Die Hard immediately after Love Actually, you'll see Alan Rickman get his comeuppance for being horrible to Emma Thompson.
There's holes in that. First of all, fictional characters, and second of all, Die Hard was like 15 years earlier.
Yeah, and Die Hard's not a Christmas film either, but. Now, see, I know we're off on a tangent, but I always have this argument when people say, yes, it's Christmas, it's set at Christmas. I said, well, why was it released in July then?
If we want to pick holes in Christmas films, we have to pick holes in the greatest Christmas film, Home Alone. And the question is, how do Kevin's parents afford that house? There must be some sort of illegal activities going on to afford a house that big. It's ridiculous.
I've not seen 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or however many there are now, but did they ever get told off for neglect?
I think that there's some sorts of questions asked, but the second one, it's more a case of how does a kid end up on a plane with, on the basis that his parents are already there. The third and fourth I haven't seen because they don't have Macaulay Culkin as Kevin as like the central part of it. I think it's one of his other relatives. I think the same things happened to his cousin or something like that. And it's just no. It's got to be Kevin. Kevin is the central thing of it.
Yeah. Now, a very tenuous link, but it is sort of comedy related. What I watched recently, the wife and I, we watched all 3 series back to back, and it starred Kieran Culkin, which is Macaulay's brother, and it was Succession, an American show. It's it's like a comedy drama. That was quite funny in places. I say, trying to think of things that made me laugh, and that you got me the link with Culkin, and it was Kieran, and I do believe Kieran Culkin did have a small part in Home Alone 1.
Yes. I think he's one of the younger siblings or something. But there's just so many of them. that it's just kind of it's difficult to kind of keep track of who everybody is, but you end up seeing. You'll see the films again, and you'll be like, "Hang on, that's a young so and so from whatever," and it is a very sort of odd film in that sense. But that is our review of 2021 and the work of Rowan Atkinson, with a little bit of Christmas films in there as well. All that remains now is for us to say we hope that our listeners have an amazing 2022. Certainly can't be a worse than 2021, I hope. It's been a bit of a whirlwind year for us as a podcast, as before 2021, we didn't exist.
No.
So it has to be said, massive thank you to everyone that has got involved, listening, downloading, interacting with us. For us to have listeners right across the world is something beyond our sort of wildest hopes and dreams in that sort of sense. So, we hope that you've enjoyed listening to the shows so far as much as we've enjoyed putting them together.
Yeah, I'd like to reiterate the thanks to all for listening and getting involved, and also like to personally thank Andy, who took a punt on me. Didn't know me from Adam, really, just a little bit of Twitter interaction. And I've actually listened back to the episodes, and yeah, we're building up quite a rapport, and sort of I'm the miserable one and he's the knowledgeable one, and it works. And he does very well to direct these podcasts from afar, because I do go off on a tangent and just witter about all sorts of stuff, and he manages to rein me in and bring us back on topic. So well done, Andy, and thank you.
And while we're having the mutual thanks fest, massive thanks to Verso for being the one who kind of takes this away from just me sitting in a room talking about comedy. Your knowledge is far superior to mine, especially with the older stuff. But it's been an absolute pleasure just to be involved with this, and to be able to put these episodes out once a month to talk about the kind of comedy greats. And if anyone enjoys them as much as we do, then sort of mission accomplished in that sense. We're going to have loads more content in 2022 because, well, why wouldn't we? And we look forward to bringing you loads more interesting content around comedy, and hopefully there's going to be some great new shows for us all to watch and sit and moan about.
Yeah, I really do hope there's some new, interesting, and more importantly, funny comedy in 2022. Because I think the last proper comedy I laughed at was 2001, The Office. So I need something new now, just to prove to people that I'm not a boring old stuck in the past, and I can associate with modern stuff.
Well, I'm sure that there'll be something good somewhere, but we're going to be back on the 1st of February with another comedy legend. We will do a little bit of a tease beforehand on Twitter as to who that is going to be. But if you do have any particular show or sitcom star that you want us to cover in a future episode, then all you need to do is get onto Twitter, give us a follow, and you'll find us at Comedy Room Pod, and just give us a nudge as to who you want us to cover. And you never know, in future episodes you might find your particular favorite comedy star featured. So all that remains for us to say is thank you, everybody, for listening and your continued support. It means the absolute world to us. And have an absolutely excellent new year, and we will see you all in 2022.